The contenders lined up before a lunchtime crowd right on 12:30 to face a multitude of fitness tests. First came the flexibility check. Suppleness was all important here. All 6 entrants, Garth Anderson and Norm Skellams representing the press, Garth Russell and Jeff Milne radio, and Mike Rabbit and me television passed to various degrees. But then came a tough one. Pedaling for 3 minutes with pulse checks before and at minute intervals afterwards. Sit-ups followed, as many as we could in a minute, and then a balance test, not easy on one foot with eyes shut. Keeping us honest were Year 10 students from Merriweather High School who took away the results for compilation as part of their practical test in human movement studies. In charge, PE teacher Debbie Sullivan.
These students have only ever administered testing amongst themselves before, and it's given them the opportunity to administer the test to other people, for example the media today, and they can compare the results of those people then.
And it was also a necessary part of their course?
Yes, it's a necessary part of their course to be able to do this practically and to understand it.
The results of today's exercise will remain secret, but suffice it to say that the handicapper had overweighted the press, and 2HD's Jeff Milne let down the radio team by calling for an oxyviva. So, who were left? No names, no factory.
In tonight's NBN News, groceries fly as the 1988 Checker of the Year is chosen. An operator from Cessnock took out the title, correctly tallying 40 items in as many seconds.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
After having encountered blinding rain, searing heat and freezing nights, it would have been understandable if the travellers were a little less than enthusiastic when we caught up with them just west of Gresford. But far from it, they were bursting with tales to tell about their journey, even surprisingly Viv Walsh, the drive boss, a man reputed to be of enormous droving expertise and few words.
Oh, I still love it, I suppose, but, you know, getting a bit ancient, isn't it?
What about the times? Is it harder to drive now than it was back when you started?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think just in here it is because you've got all the traffic, but out when you're away you've got the wide routes and, you know, plenty of room.
One of the chief fears for organisers of the drive was that some of the beasts might lose condition during such a long trip, but cast an eye over the mob, now 313 head, and one would have to say they look better than when they set out from Merriweather 3 weeks ago. Even these giant bullocks, who the experienced men gave little chance of carrying their enormous 1-ton frame over the journey, were looking well. Definitely they were far more muscled than when they left, and according to Viv, they have every chance of fetching more than $1,000 when they go under the hammer at next Thursday's Bicentennial cattle sale at Maitland, where all the mob is headed. Of course, there's far more to the big drive than just a day on the trail. There's also the nights in front of the campfire, where the band has the chance to rest its weary feet, hooves, and in some cases paws. Along the way, the mob has been treated to some excellent stock reserves, with feed in abundant supply as it has been along the roadside. Today, the team made only its second town crossing, passing through the small village of Gresford, bringing school children and adults out onto the sidewalks to wave them on. And there was even a case of ale on hand, for a bit of quick relief for those parched throats.
The report on the future of higher education was prepared at the request of the Minister, Dr. Metherall. Its main recommendation is for the 21 colleges and universities in New South Wales to be amalgamated into 7 super universities, in line with the Federal Government's White Paper on tertiary education. Federal Education Minister Dawkins wishes to make research grants payable only to those institutions with enrolments greater than 8,000. The report suggests that the older established universities form a network with a number of colleges. However, tertiary institutions traditionally guard their autonomy, and it will not be an idea that will be readily accepted. One of those who welcomes the changes, however, is Vice-Chancellor of Newcastle University, Professor Keith Morgan.
The complications of doing this in the Sydney metropolitan area seem to be very severe indeed. Fortunately, in Newcastle we're not afflicted with those complications. We have a much more straightforward pattern of development, and one which is clearly supported by the Office of Higher Education and the Minister.
The report also suggests that Newcastle University and the Hunter Institute of Higher Education amalgamate to form a Hunter Region network, which would also incorporate a new university campus on the Central Coast at Arimba. That region is one of the fastest growth areas in the state, and a university has been on the books for years. Back in the 70s, the government purchased an 80-hectare site behind the Arimba railway station, setting it aside for that purpose. A Central Coast Tertiary College Action Committee has been lobbying the government for the campus for several years. According to Chairman Emeritus Professor Cliff Elliott, the committee has applied for around $1 million in funding for the first year, half to go on buildings and the remainder to bring lecturers from the University of Newcastle and the Hunter Institute of Higher Education. The campus will be an arm of Newcastle University, offering only individual courses at first, possibly in computing or business studies.
It certainly is bound to grow because the population there is growing. How quickly it'll grow and to what scale it'll grow depends very much on the growth of population, but it certainly will become a very important centre for higher education.
The state government has reportedly endorsed the report in broad terms. Whether the tertiary institutions are as accepting remains to be seen. They have until November the 30th to submit their comments. If the federal government then approves funding, the state government plans to introduce the changes early next year. Ross Hampton for NBN News.
As its name implies, the production is the recreation of a 1938 radio show. 50 years ago, live radio really was just that. Singers, musicians, announcers and actors performed live in the studio. It led to some magic moments and enthralled family audiences worldwide. And Shauna Kelly, musical coordinator with Musica Viva, is hoping that same enchantment will be there when the show puts on its second-only performance in Newcastle tonight.
In terms of music, 1938 is a great year to choose. I mean, on the one hand, it's 50 years ago. It was the time Australia was celebrating its sesquicentenary. On the other hand, in 1938, Irving Berlin turned 50, which is hard to imagine. I mean, he turned 100 years old this year. So, of course, we have lots of Irving Berlin songs.
In all, 16 are involved in the production, 4 actors, 8 musicians and 4 staff, who through the work and support of Musica Viva and the New South Wales Bicentennial Council will make a series of stops across the state. And while it's certainly a show for all ages, Shauna believes it will be extra special for some.
I think this is a real nostalgia trip for old people, people who grew up in the 20s and 30s and 40s, people who remember the old serials, for instance, on radio, and we'll be doing a serial in this show, people who remember the songs, and there are some wonderful songs from that period.
The conference is held in a different state each year. This year's theme is cooperation between government, business and trade unions, and the local chamber successfully argued that Newcastle has become a showpiece in that arena. It's an image the chamber says it won't be backward in putting forward next week.
conference is looking at unions, business, putting Australia first, and I think it's a great opportunity for Newcastle to put its best image forward in its pursuit of the frigate contract.
The conference will be officially opened at the City Hall on Thursday by Governor-General Singleton Stephen.
Brownies amongst them, the girls
and political leaders,
inviting my wife
leader John
and me.
Howard, Senator Peter Walsh and ACTU Vice President John McBean. This will be the first time the conference has been held outside a capital city, and the Newcastle Chamber of Commerce is preparing to make the most of its coup. It says just having the delegates here will help dispel many misconceptions about Newcastle, and it plans to take advantage of any spare moments in the program.
We'll be using every opportunity we can to influence these decision makers that come along. Yes, we'll be pushing the region, and I think importantly there'll be opportunities given to local organisations to put their position to the media, the national media.
The Chamber says it will use the conference to push Newcastle's case for building the Anzac frigates. According to Mr Rundle, a possible spin-off of that could be the long-awaited container terminal for the port. The Chamber has identified an area west of the State dockyard, which it says, with some modification, is the best site for the facility.
I think the things are complementary. I think the container terminal there would be a great advantage to that as a frigate construction site.
The Chamber would also like to see another smaller addition to the port. It is recommending the Council move the Maritime Museum at Fort Scratchley to a location near the newly opened Windward Passage Cabin and the William IV to boost tourism in the area. Mr Rundle denies the move would have any effect on Fort Scratchley. The art show has grown from small beginnings to be a prestige event well supported by the local community. This year 250 artists from as far away as the Central Coast and Sydney submitted work, amazing judges with both the standard and diversity of styles. The competition is judged in 5 sections, winners sharing almost $3,000 in prize money. The exhibition is a fundraising activity and organisers hope it will raise $2,000 to be divided between Irrawang and Raymond Terrace primary schools. Winners will be announced at the official opening later tonight, with the display open to the public all weekend. The proposed resort includes an 18-hole golf course, a 300-room international standard hotel and several hundred residential lots. The latter brought the developers, Merrill Corporation, into conflict with neighbouring vignerons, who claimed the houses would destroy the character of the area. In accordance with council directives, the developers have reduced the number of residential lots by around 100 and created 26 4-hectare vineyard lots as a buffer zone around the development.
The community
These will
here
be
in the
planted with
vineyards are very
grapevines, which will be managed by one of the large local vineyards. To gain council approval, the developers have also promised more than $3 million for road improvements and the upgrading of Cessnock Airport. Cessnock Council says it expects to pass the building applications within weeks, allowing some construction to begin in early January.
More than 100 eager cyclists of all ages gathered at Newcastle foreshore before setting out on a 9-kilometre tour of the city and several of its best-known landmarks. The weather couldn't have been better for the riders, who adhered strictly to one of the themes of Bike Week, safety. Helmets were the order of the day, and observation of road rules was also strictly observed. Organisers say Bike Week has a number of important objectives. High on the list is the establishment of a network of cycleways and widespread upgrading of existing roads. But equally, they hope to make riders more aware of their responsibilities.
The main message is enjoy your cycling, and to do that you have to be safe. So we like people to know the road rules and obey them.
Among the highlights of Bike Week will be a bike to breakfast on Wednesday, and for those not too exhausted, a ride from Dungog through Raymond Terrace and back to Waratah next Sunday. While the cyclists celebrated, another group was revelling in an earlier mode of transport, walking. Bushwalkers have just completed a 250-kilometre hike from Sydney through 4 national parks and 7 state forests to Newcastle. After 3 months exploring the Lands Department-sponsored walking trail, the hikers still had the energy for one last parade along the foreshore to celebrate their achievement. Other bushwalkers will be able to sample sections of the route when it officially opens in a fortnight, but hike organiser Gary McDougall says the Great North Walk has unique attractions.
Well, we've gone through just about every kind of ecoculture there is. We've had 10 people, average age of 58, and they've all made it 270 kilometres, so they've all taken on a great challenge and they've all come home and they've made it.
Okay. Meanwhile, scouts and guides around the world were saving themselves a hike by getting in touch over the airwaves. Newcastle patrols were tuned in to other groups across Australia and the world as part of their annual jamboree on the air. According to scout and guide leaders, the exercise has already created new bonds between various groups, with many accepting invitations to visit each other in the near future.
The parties building over time.
The report was compiled by Julie Brady of the Graduate School of Management in Sydney, who explained her conclusions to a lunchtime seminar in Newcastle today. Direct comparisons with other regions are impossible because of the lack of relevant statistics and the uniqueness of the Hunter's industrial base. So the 40-page report looks at a number of case studies, site agreements and flexibility agreements negotiated since the so-called boom of the early 80s. They are divided into 3 sections: partial umbrella agreements covering large numbers of unions on big sites, such as power stations, aluminium smelters and hospitals, commercial construction sites like shopping centres, and flexibility agreements to increase efficiency at manufacturing plants like Carrington Slipway's fiberglass division with its single union coverage, and Hexam Engineering's more recent and more complex work agreement. In the conclusion to her study, Julie Brady says 50 major projects have been completed on time and under budget with minimal industrial disruption, meaning constructive and effective industrial relations are emerging.
The idea at the moment in the industrial relations field is to restructure the way work is performed and to provide new ways of training people and skilling people so that they can perform a range of jobs and a range of functions. And I think those lessons are true for any organisation.
Carrington Slipway's Managing Director Don Laverick says such studies are important in his quest for the frigates contract, but we cannot be complacent. Other factors will also decide the winner.
Nobody owes Newcastle a living, Ray. We have to win it, we have to earn it. We have to have it, all the things necessary, and industrial relations is just one of them.
And the other things are product and price.
Exactly. The price is the most important according to the Navy, and we believe them on that, and that's what we're working on now.
The chairman of the Hunter Valley Research Foundation, Professor Michael Carter, had the last word at today's seminar, and it was a buoyant one.
It shows that the Hunter region has got its act together over the last decade, that we can deliver the goods. I think there's another message, namely that we have to shout loudly and even more clearly that we can deliver the goods.
Jemison and Ron Bernstein, the association's General Manager for Sales and Service, was also a chance to view the Hunter's roads, and from what he saw, Mr Jemison clearly wasn't impressed.
We looked at several of the key roads coming up, and it's difficult from the air, but having driven on most of the roads, all of the roads, main roads in the area, I'm appalled at the condition of them. The heavy trucks particularly are tearing the roads to pieces. They're deteriorating faster than local government and state road construction authorities can maintain them.
So what's the end result going to be if it goes on this way, continues this way?
The end result is that local government particularly will have to rip up the bitumen and go back to gravel roads.
That was a prospect Singleton Shire President Neil McNamara admitted his council hadn't been forced to take yet, but he said the lack of money being given to local government for roads from both state and federal funding was beginning to take its toll, with even the simple task of maintenance now almost beyond budget reach.
We have a resealing program from our local rate structure, but of course that's very difficult. The increasing content of road components is increasing all the time, and we are not able to get enough money to continue a resealing program. We have plenty of people who are writing to us and telling us of our deteriorating road system.
But there was a larger note to today's visit, and that was the opening ceremony, which had a mixture of both old and new. Certainly the move to the John Street office means a whole new beginning for the Singleton branch, but these examples of motoring history reminded everyone that the NRMA had been operating in the town successfully a long time before the plush new surroundings arrived. The actual opening was a small, dignified ceremony. Neil McNamara noted how much the NRMA had achieved in its 54 years in the town, and then Ron Bernstein did the honours.
No, I don't think I quibble with that. I mean, if they've got credit cards, let them use them in Newcastle. I don't think businesses in central Newcastle are going to benefit from this tower.
That's the second thing. His claim that the tower will revitalise the central business district.
Well, the drama all began when police were called to a business in Mayfield where the three attempted to cash a stolen cheque. Just as police arrived, they sped off, and there followed a high-speed chase through the streets of Newcastle, which eventually ended here in Hunter Street West. Now, NBN sports commentator Mike Rabbit just happened to be on the scene, and Mike, I believe there was plenty of high drama.
There certainly was, Tracy. I was catching a bus down at the Pink Ellies to come up to where 2 and X is, and just as I was getting on the bus, this blue car went through the set of stoplights, followed by 2 police cars going at incredible speed, sirens blaring. Another car turned off and went down Stewart Avenue, and at this stage no one knew what was going on. Then the bus moved off slowly, and another 2 or 3 patrol cars went past. And when we got up to the bus stop here at 2 and X, we just went to the bank corner and had a look down here towards Hoyt's, and there was this car, the blue car, pointing in towards the front door of Hoyt's, and there seemed to be 2 bodies on the road, and one person on the bus said, "Oh, well, there you go, another couple of people killed." But in actual fact, what it was the police obviously dragging the offenders out of the car, lying them on the ground and handcuffing them, and then dragging them away. But there certainly was some high drama there for a while.
The 3 were taken to Newcastle Police Station where they were questioned and later charged. A 16-year-old youth from Sydney will face Warramai Children's Court tomorrow on 4 charges, one related to his escape from the detention centre on October 9. The 15-year-old East Maitland girl will appear in Warramai next month on 2 charges, while an 18-year-old man was charged with 1 offence. His bail is yet to be determined. However, late this afternoon, detectives were still questioning the 3 in relation to their possible connection with last week's Melbourne police shootings. They're attempting to establish the trio's whereabouts over the last week and have also questioned acquaintances of the 3. Tracy Reid reporting for NBN News.
That'll be another test for us, and we've reached it, we've come to the challenge each time, and we've displayed the goods that most Newcastle people or the public are aware that we can do. We're looking forward to the challenge, and I think the boys, the way we've been training, will come through with that challenge.